Wow, we're gonna start this right on time. I'm gonna mute, Brett's gonna mute and unmute himself. There's like some weird background noise here, so if you are hearing anything wacky, please speak up. Otherwise, I'm gonna let the guests into the room. And we are recording. Okay. Brett, you take us off when you're ready.
Good morning, everybody. This is a public meeting of the Indiana Arts Commission On-Ramp Fellowship 2019, the advisory review panel for design, media, and the performing arts. I am Brett Roberts, IAC staff. Today is July 15th, and we are meeting by conference call and streaming live from a webinar. We welcome applicants who may be listening in today and would like to remind you that you are muted for this review. There is no direct contact or conversation about the evaluation and disposition of applications before, during, or after the panel meeting. At this time, we would like the panelists and staff to introduce themselves, stating their name, occupation, and where they are from in the state. Takara Mallard.
Takara, you're muted, sorry.
Arts Administrator and Comic, Indianapolis, Indiana.
Thank you. Maddie McMahon.
I'm a video and film director based in Indianapolis, Indiana.
Anna Powell-Teeter.
I'm a photographer and videographer, as well as the creative director and editor of Driftless Magazine. I'm in Bloomington, Indiana.
Jaleesa Wells.
I am a lecturer in Arts and Festivals Management in England. I'm from Bloomington, and I'm also a researcher in creative entrepreneurship.
Polina Osterov.
I'm a commercial photographer and the executive director and editor-in-chief of Pattern Magazine. I'm from Indianapolis.
Janine Blevins.
Hi, I'm Janine, and I own and run Quintext with my husband, Ben, and we do design work, communications work, also help on publications, and yeah, happy to be here.
Anna Tragisser.
Hi, Anna Tragisser, IAC staff.
All right. Panelist Jimmy Blankenship was unable to participate in today's discussion. On applications where he is listed as first reader, the second reader will serve as first reader instead, and where he is listed as second reader, we will open up to the full panel for discussion. This panel is structured to give feedback that will help the applicant strengthen their fellowship project to advance their career. The discussion will also help IAC staff identify any important modifications applications may be required to make to their fellowship project before moving forward. Now we'll begin the panel review. This is how the process will work. I will announce the application we will review and ask the first reader to begin the discussion. The first reader will provide advice to strengthen the fellowship project, focusing on the evaluation criteria from their perspective. Panelists, please note that the applications do not need to be recapped since everyone has read it. Just provide your commentary. After the first reader is finished, I will ask the second reader to present any new, additional, or opposing comments. We are not looking for consensus. We want the applicant to receive excellent advice from the different perspectives panelists bring to the table. After the second reader has finished, I will open the discussion for final comments. Remember, in the interest of time, we are only looking for new, additional, or opposing viewpoints. If a panelist has a conflict of interest, that panelist will be placed on hold while that application is reviewed. However, there are no conflicts of interest in this panel today. Finally, once the application has been reviewed by the full panel, we will ask the panel to update their comments in the online system. It is common for recommendations to change as a result of this broader discussion. These changes do save automatically. Are there any questions?
Yeah, I forgot to mention pre-meeting. So when Jimmy is listed as a first reader, then the second reader on that application is going to be the first reader instead, which is fine. You're good with that. And then where he's listed as a second reader, if there are any volunteers, you can do that, but we'll just open it up to the rest of the panel. And I also forgot to mention that you can change any of your comments or recommendations. So if you hear something that changes the way that you see that, please feel free to do that live. We'll give you a moment to take care of it before it progresses on to the next application.
And if at any point you need time to process anything, please let me know and we can take a step back for a second. So All right, we will begin the process now then. So we'll start with the application from Ben Fulcher, and the first reader is Jaleesa.
Okay, so this application, I'm just going to kind of go down based on the 3 different sections. The goals section, I thought that each of the points were fully addressed, but I thought there could be a little bit more detail, in particular, thinking about how getting new equipment and materials would then actually enhance the goal's success. So making that connection a bit clearer. But overall, you know, having a long-term goal and then having a way to reach that long-term goal was good. Feasibility, I thought that section was fine and that it had a good amount of explanation and structure to the project. And then the community section, I thought it was adequately addressed, but it was kind of light on some of the details. So I thought it would be interesting for the person to consider making those deeper connections between their work and their desired work, and then the state of animation, like the market of animation. So making those different connections in their community and how that would lead to sort of that, you know, business endeavor. Sorry, mine's short.
Thank you very much. The second reader on this application is Maddie McMahon.
Hey, so I agree, I think overall with the assessment of where everything is. One note I have on the goals section is though it's outlined that Ben wants to learn new skills and he says that he wants to be better with certain competencies and proficiencies. I think it would help to actually outline what those specific goals are. There's a lot of different animation techniques that could take shape throughout this, and since those aren't specified, it's hard to know which proficiencies or which competencies he's going to improve in. And because one of the overall goals of this project is to help him reach out to other directors and become more marketable as well, I think that reaching out to different studios, either animation studios or film production studios, like Think Ahead Studios, the one that I work for, and asking some animators that are on staff, what are some of the techniques that you use? What are some of the things that you see in my work that I can improve? And then taking the answers to some of those questions and trying to incorporate them specifically into what the project is. So setting a goal for a certain animation competency or some of the foundations of animation, and really using this as an opportunity to study those specific things in addition to producing this project. I think the project is super cool. I watched a couple of his examples. If y'all haven't done that, one of the links that he sent is this primordial soup stop animation thing. It's a very fun take on evolution. As far as the community engagement, I think that that is where I see this application needing the most work, as was just stated. And I think a couple of ideas that I had in terms of linking it back to community. Think about what the work will inspire in your audience or what you want it to. So emotional or creative connections with the people who are going to be watching the 3 different pieces. And then also what you learned in this process, potentially taking it back and doing a workshop or talking with other animators about what you've learned through the process. And then maybe on a deeper level is, why is it important to have this kind of art or this kind of media in order to express ourselves? And once those things, I think, get addressed, it's just naturally going to fit into the community where you are, both the animation community and then literally the geographic community where we live in the central Indiana area. I skipped the feasibility section on purpose. I think for this, there's a wide range of where these videos could go. Somewhere between 2 and 5 minutes of animation is a huge difference in the amount of work that it's going to take. And so I think maybe drilling in, I know that the interviews haven't been done yet, but drilling in on a time frame that has less variance. You know, a 5-minute animation could take years depending on the style of it, but a 2-minute animation might be more feasible. I think as far as expenses or anything like that, I think it's really strong, and I think that the way that the project is thought through is really strong. And so just honing in on a couple of those more specific competencies and then also the parameters of the project will really help it.
All right, thank you, Maddie. Now we'll open up to the full panel. Are there any new, additional, or opposing comments? If not, we'll go ahead. Please finalize your comments in the online system. It'll take like 30 seconds to do that. And let me know if you need more time. All right. Seeing no more time needed, we will head on to the next application, Brooke Hawkins. Our first reader is Janine Blevins.
All right, getting everything pulled up here. All right, I really enjoyed reading Brooke's application. It was very straightforward, linear, clear, well thought through. She, I think, has a really solid plan to both kind of achieve her long-term goals of having her own design studio with a physical workspace and some employees. I think that the project of going to a conference can be really easily achieved. So I offered in my comments just some suggestions to maybe up the ante a little bit, since she is already going to be well on her way to getting this project accomplished. So some of the ideas I had from going to past conferences myself was perhaps she could do like a sketch notes project where she's capturing the panels and the conversations had at the conference in a really unique way. And that in turn becomes kind of content that she can share on social media or with her friends or through Instagram stories, etc. Also, I think a big part of her project was to do networking. And so just taking this time to think about how she stands out. There's gonna be a lot of business cards handed out. So perhaps there's like a small notebook or portfolio piece or sample of her work that she can bring to share with a select, 5 people that she makes like a really promising connection with as a nice leave behind and encouraging some follow-up. On to feasibility. Again, I thought it was a really clearly outlined expenses plan, etc., which then again left room to kind of taking advantage of the spontaneous opportunities that might pop up at such a conference that's like bringing together so many of your favorite people. So just prompting her to think about, if she hasn't already, is there somebody she wants to reach out to before and start lining up a dinner or coffee or something like that? Is there a nearby bar or restaurant to the hotel in the conference that she knows about that she could like kind of instigate a little small gathering or something if the hotel and the official gatherings are really crowded and people are kind of overwhelmed. So kind of looking for those really special setups or connections that might help her go a little bit further in broadening her network. And as far as community engagement, it's really awesome to read about all the ways that she's plugged into Columbus and kind of the broader community. I know she has a lot of ties in Indianapolis too. Particularly thinking about that creative roll call group that she has, I thought maybe kind of circling back to my suggestion on the goals, that might be a good place for her to share kind of a recap or her notes from the conference and kind of continue the value of those lessons and getting them back to the community. And then, oh yeah, just reiterating, like reach out to people ahead of time at the conference and make sure you kind of have a solid plan going into it. That way you walk away successful.
Perfect, thank you. Our second reader on Brooke Hawkins' application is Anna Powell-Peter.
Hi, so I really enjoyed looking at Brooke's work, and something I noticed is that she does so much amazing different types of work. She works in so many different mediums. So I kind of felt like in preparation for this event, she could really kind of hone in on what her goals are for her brand and her studio. And then since she is so connected locally, she could start to start the work that she hopes to achieve at the conference by getting in touch with people locally and starting to ask those questions so that she can be really prepared for what she specifically wants to get out of meeting people at the conference. And also even potentially establishing her brand, because like June said, you oftentimes just have a few minutes with people. And so if you do have a business card or something that you can give out while she's there, and considering that she has until June to make this happen, that could be like a good way to spend her time to get going before she goes there in June.
Perfect, thank you. Are there any new, additional, or opposing comments from the entire panel? Hearing none, we'll move forward.
Sorry, I have one.
Okay. Sorry, yep, you're fine.
On the community engagement piece, something that we've instituted is when one of the members of our studio goes to a conference or anything like this, they come back with the intention of doing a workshop for everybody else, so passing on some of that learning. So piggybacking on the comment that was made earlier about incorporating the Columbus roll call, they might benefit from some sort of workshop or some learnings that you take away from the conference when she comes back.
Yeah, that's wonderful. Thank you. Any more additional or opposing comments? All right, seeing none, let's finalize our comments in the online system. And please let me know if you need more time for that. We'll take about 15 seconds here. Our next application will be Dion Parsons, so if you want to get that pulled up on your computers here. And the first reader for Dion's application will be Polina, and you may begin whenever.
Yeah, so I really enjoyed his application, and I like the comics that he does. He's planning on going to a conference. What I got out of reading this is that you know, he's interested in networking, and he said getting out of his comfort zone, which I think is great and very important to build a career. I did feel like he didn't, and that's probably because he hasn't gone before, didn't have as many details as I'd like to see on what that really entailed. Going to a trade show, especially one of this size, is pretty daunting. There's a lot of details that go into it, everything from insurance to marketing materials to who's minding your booth if you're trying to network. And I'd love to see that better thought through, if you will. This is a tremendous opportunity, and so I know that he is planning on bringing like buttons and t-shirts and stickers, but I feel like there needs to be more than that. With an event this size, people will usually have booths that are pretty decked out, and so I think that it would be great if he thought about and looked into what booths could be other than just like a tablecloth and some stuff on it. Presentation is really, really important. What else? Feasibility. Yeah, I think like, again, more details, more forethought about how it's going to go down, how he's going to take advantage. I think there were some good suggestions made for a previous panelist where it's like you need to plan in advance who you're going to connect with and see if you can start getting out of your comfort zone earlier. I didn't see anything about social media on here, but I reckon because of the nature of his work, he's probably should make an effort to connect through social media to potential people who are going there. There's probably a list of panelists, not panelists, but exhibitors that he can connect with. Let's see, community engagement. Yeah, connection with peers just seemed a little vague to me. What's different about going to the event versus doing stuff on social media? I'd love to see that sketched out a little bit more. I imagine obviously connecting with people face to face is really crucial. But again, does he have somebody helping him at the booth so he can duck out and do that? I'm not quite sure. So I let's see, what else did I put down? Well, that's pretty much it. That's all I've got.
Before we move on, sorry, I'm pulling up, before we move on, any other specific ideas of how he could address that community engagement aspect of more specifically?
I have some thoughts.
Yeah, jump in.
So again, this is Takara, and just thinking about the community engagement piece, he spent just a little bit of time talking about the mentors he has, or just this vague peer idea, but I'd really love to know who his comics are for, the impact that he's hoping to make. So I really feel like maybe just to strengthen that piece up a bit, he could talk to us a little bit about who he's making these comics for, the culture or niche he's wanting to attach himself to or attract to. I think that might be a way to go. Again, C2E2 is a huge convention conference space, and so just thinking about who he wants to attract might make it a little less daunting of an experience for him, and it will also help get things sold.
Wonderful.
Thank you, appreciate that.
Thank you for those comments. Our second reader on this application is Maddie.
So I won't echo too much of what Paulina said, though. I think that much of what she said is where my feedback was focused. As far as the community engagement piece, I know that part of what the applicant is doing is also teaching workshops, and specifically with youth and with schools and with libraries. And so potentially this is a way that you can incorporate the learnings from the conference. Again, I hate to say the same thing I said for the last applicant, but going to a conference and then bringing some of that learnings back, I think, especially with the audience that you have built in with students, could be really helpful to help somebody else make a profitable career out of the same thing that you're already doing. And it's also going to make the applicant think about this in a different way in terms of having to teach it to somebody, having to go there with some specific learnings in mind. Other thing that I'll say is that it seems like he's already got some peers. He mentions Jim Davis in the application, who have probably either been to or know what it takes to be successful at one of these events. And so I would suggest even just reaching out to someone who's already been there to see more about what it's like before actually being in attendance. I think that's one way to either build out the booth in a different way or really just focus on the kinds of things that you want to get out of it. One last comment that I'll make is in the goals section. It seems like part of what you want to get out of going to the conference is what do I need to take to a conference? And I think you just do a lot more research beforehand to figure some of that stuff out.
Awesome. Thank you very much, Maddie. Any new additional or opposing comments on Dion Parsons' application? All right.
Can I add something, actually?
Please.
So one of the things that I thought about this application was that he's wanting to go to conferences to sell things. So he's going to have these products to sell. But if he doesn't sell them, to think about other ways to utilize those products, because you have that collateral, in other words. So that's one of the things that I wrote down and something to think about, particularly how those products then can help you build that business that you're trying to create to be that premier Indiana comic artist in a way. That's just one added comment to that.
Perfect, thank you. Any more additional comments? All right, looks like we'll move on. So let's finalize our comments in the online system. Real quick, just also our next application will be Emily Gartner, so you could pull that application up during this time as well. All right, we'll start the application for Emily Gartner. Our first reader on this application is Janine Blevins.
All right, looking through Emily, I felt like she had a lot of details in there, and this is one that maybe reading the goals, I had one impression, and then by the time I got to the end of the application, I had another impression. So I think one of my points of feedback was just overall kind of strengthening the structure of the application. because I feel like she shared just like a lot of information and maybe too much in some areas, and it was kind of hard for me to follow it at some points. What she did have to say was actually really wonderful. So I think just, yeah, working on how it gets expressed would be really helpful. In addition, I felt like because of that, I had a hard time understanding what the main project goal was, which I think was generally taking her design to the next level by getting this laptop and some programs, because she's been kind of stitching things together and is ready to upgrade. But I suggested that perhaps maybe defining that a little bit more. She had mentioned some like workshops and online sewing classes, and maybe making that the main focus. It would kind of bring in all these other goals at the same time, but just like provide a little bit more measurable and clear thread throughout the whole project. Feasibility wise, I mean, thinking about the computer and design software that she wanted to buy, I thought that was really doable. Recommended Illustrator, just thinking about, in addition to the Photoshop kind of work that she is doing, Illustrator might be a little bit better fit than InDesign, which I think could be a little bit more geared towards like books and layouts and stuff like that, whereas Illustrator, she can get a lot more control on the design she's making. Also in this section, I think she had started detailing a physical classroom in a retail space and renting it. And so that was like some additional detail that wasn't necessarily like expressed in other sections, but just kind of like piqued my interest because it sounded really interesting, but perhaps if you're gonna mention, maybe like put a little bit more meat into it so that as a reviewer, or even somebody you're just talking to about your idea, can kind of grasp all the different components that is going into your project and your work. Finally, with community engagement, it seemed like she had a really good grasp on what her options were and is already super involved. And I made a suggestion, if she hadn't been doing it already, I think there's like an online place called Spoonflower where you can make your designs, get them produced, but also people can like buy your fabrics, and it could be a great way for her to like get outside of kind of the immediate circle that she has and find some new customers.
Wonderful, thank you. Our second reader is Polina.
I think Janine did a great job of covering it. I think my comment in here was that, you know, she was sort of, I'm trying to find it. I said, not sure that all these plans are really dependent on her having a working computer, but good to see that she's planning to expand her business. So yes, agreed that there's a lot going on here. She's got a lot of really great plans. Obviously, having technology that works well is essential to making that happen. I echo Janine's thoughts. It'd be nice to see a more linear line of thinking here. But overall, I think she knows what's available to her. Even though she's down in Evansville, she's plugged in with the Indianapolis fashion community. She's got the background and the experience. I think that she's just super excited to get engaged overall with what's going on here. And you know, obviously it takes more than a working computer, but I think it's a good start. That's really all I have.
All right, thank you. We will now open it up to any new, additional, or opposing comments from the entire panel.
Can I add a piece? So one of the things that I gave feedback on for this particular application, but generally for everybody, is is to think about the impact of that machine on your business, and don't just, I mean, because so far we've talked about how it could, you know, it helps you to enter into newer technology spaces, I guess. But the way that I broke it down in a way is also to think about it in terms of like your efficiency, which gives you more time, which means you have more opportunities to go out and meet other people because you have that computer that's faster and it's more up to date and it gives you access to things that you didn't have before. So if she had found a way to articulate it that way, that would have been really helpful and probably streamlined a lot of all the other ideas to say, oh, I can take my computer with me and put it in my bag. I've also got it and it's fast, and I can connect it to this, and I can show people this, and it just really streamlines her business in a new way. Particularly because she's talking about adding it to a business that already exists rather than creating a new business and needing a computer for a new business.
Wonderful. Thank you very much. Any additional comments?
Yeah, one quick thing. It seems like a big part of her vision for what she's already doing is sustainability and this concept of slow fashion as well. And so I think reaching out to other people who are already doing this and seeing if there is a network that already exists. I know at least in Indianapolis, there at least is a small burgeoning community of people who are thinking about these kinds of things. And so I think reaching out to people who are already doing it would definitely be helpful to see how that computer or how that software or how anything else could really take the business to the next level.
Thank you very much. Any additional comments on top
I have
of those?
a thought as well. One thing that I really would have loved to see while I was evaluating is an instance of a timeline. Again, Jaleesa made the point of how she's going to use the machine and the machine being efficient. And I really would have loved to see, you know, for example, there's this fashion week coming up, or I'm planning to do this later on. I would really love to see how that machine was going to work towards a goal. The passion was there. She had great examples of the work, but I really would have loved to see a timeline of how she would use that machine to accomplish an upcoming task, event, project, or program.
Thank you very much. Any more additional comments? All right. Let's finalize our comments in the online system. Let me know if you need any additional time for that. You can also pull up the next application, which is Eric Salazar, while you're finalizing your comments. All right, we'll hold on here for Anna as well. She finalizes some stuff. All righty. Our next application is Eric Salazar. Jimmy is listed as the first reader, so we'll move to the second reader, which is Maddie.
Okay, so my first comment is that I love how realistic this is in terms of its goals. I think a lot of times people will say, I want to create a music video, which is really going to put me on the map, and people are going to see it, and it's really going to help us take off. And I think that the application here is creating a music video as a tool rather than an end goal. So first of all, I think congratulations on being very thoughtful and meaningful in terms of the specific outcomes for this video. A bit of feedback, while this might be a question for the production company who is going to enlist, a $600 session for a video production company that's going to involve multiple cameras and the way that this music is going to be expressed, which seems like it's in a live setting, it could be a little bit underwhelming. And so part of the reason I say that is it's going to take a lot of finessing with microphones. And I did look up the production company that is going to use, and it seems like they have some experience in this. But just a point of feedback is, think about hiring an audio technician or someone who's going to be solely focused on the recording of the music and not just the visuals. I think as far as community engagement, it seems like it's really on point. He's already doing a lot of things and is starting a nonprofit. And I think that this tool this video as a tool, not the end product, is a cool way to think about it. Another suggestion I have is that you're going to be paying the musicians and a bunch of people who are involved in the project, and just to think about going forward, you know, if that's going to be sustainable to continue to do these types of projects.
Perfect. Thank you. We'll move to comments from the entire panel. Any new, additional, or opposing comments are welcome.
I had a few thoughts on this, especially in the feasibility area. I thought like the timeline and everything was very well thought out and laid out. But one thing I did notice was that they plan to just self-publish and release their YouTube video mid-February and then send out a ton of press releases and get in touch with local news sources and even national news sources. I thought that that could be something that they could do prior to the release and see if they could even get it premiered somewhere and kind of create a little bit more energy around the actual release of this video after all the work that's going into making it. So in addition to using it as a tool, which I think is so strategic, creating a lot of press around this to see if they could get their music and their video in front of a larger audience using a music blog or some other online resource who could help publish them and promote that video. And then even taking a step further and kind of tapping into the community engagement, having a local show where they premiere the video and then maybe play afterwards, or just creating some sort of viewing party or like first watch thing to invite people from their direct community who have been supporting them all this time to then kind of launch them into this wider, more national realm that they're trying to get to.
Thank you very much.
I think that's a really cool idea. Just to jump back in, I also, I didn't say this in my initial comments, but either hire a photographer or have somebody there who is strictly there to take behind the scenes, because the Need Hammer, the space is really cool. It sounds like the setup is going to be really awesome. So the more they can document it and then continue to repost or use that high quality photography, if other blogs or if someone is going to premiere it, would be helpful.
Any more additional comments? All right. Let's finalize our comments in the online system for Eric Salazar. As always, if you need more time, let me know. Our next application will be Jacob Drummer, if you'd like to pull that up as well. Alrighty. We will start with the application from Jacob Drummer. Our first reader on this application is Takara.
I want to start by saying I really enjoyed reading Jacob's application. I think he clearly got a lot out of his on-ramp experience, and I think he should be proud of all that he poured into it. Just 30,000 foot view, I thought everything was there. I really enjoyed hearing about his goals, the community engagement, how he was going to activate the community of Muncie, use his family of friends, very strong. Yeah, so all that was great. So really just getting into the areas of growth. Under goals, really would have loved to see some measurable goals in this. I know he mentioned, this is going to launch the night of his Performance Academy and all that great stuff, but I really wanted to see what would have come of that action. So did he want to raise funds, or did he want to garner new social media followers? Did he want to start working on board development, make connections, have people subscribe to a newsletter? I really wanted him to think about what sustainability meant and what he could have gotten from that night. And then on the feasibility side, he laid out his budget, and then I don't know if you all noticed or recall, but then he had about $1,000 worth of money that he designated as cushion money. So I really would have loved to see him revisit his budget one more time and really think about what every single dollar could do for him during this night. And it seemed like it could have done a lot. He mentioned wardrobe, he mentioned a videographer, he mentioned buying lumber and things for sets. So I really would have loved for him to revisit what every single dollar could have done for him in this instance. And that's all I have for that.
Thank you very much. Our second reader will be Jaleesa.
Definitely agree with what Takara has already said. I'm just going to add a few things to that. In terms of goals, I think for me, what I wanted to see was some SMART goals, right? So going through that sort of list and revisiting the goals and making sure that they are measurable and relevant and timely and all of those things. But when thinking about that, it sounded to me like he was trying to create a business. So it would have been nice for him to go back and think about what kind of business am I actually trying to make and what's my business model? Am I gonna raise money? Is that how I'm gonna fund my business? Am I gonna sell tickets? Is that how I'm gonna fund my business? Am I gonna sell things to educational institutions or whatever, like school groups, and have them buy into things or sponsor things? So thinking about those different levels of funding and engagement, and then what that key business model is for his business. And then in terms of feasibility, I definitely did also catch that and commented on the cushion money, as well as some aspects around fundraising. It seemed like fundraising was an opportunity to get income, but then it wasn't really reflected in the cost of fundraising. So if you're gonna use popcorn, for example, you gotta buy the popcorn, you gotta be able to pop the popcorn, you have to do all those things, and that costs money, and that's gonna eat away at that fundraising goal. So thinking about what specific aspects of fundraising are going to play into the mission of your business that will then help you market that business, as well as raise your funds, as well as develop really strong connections within the community that you're already part of.
Thank you very much. We will open up to the entire panel on comments for Jacob Drummer's application.
I really like the vision and what he's trying to do. I think it's great. I did have concerns similar to the other panelists. One of my comments is that the budget seems unrealistic with trying to raise the $2,400. It's going to take away from the efforts to actually do the event, unless I misunderstood how this is worded. I also was concerned that there were maybe not enough people on the team who'd actually had previous experience putting on an event like this. Relying on just family and friends to help you sometimes can be a little precarious when you're trying to put together something like that. So, which seems, super negative, but definitely wanting to succeed in putting this together, as this seems to be like the big step towards launching the Academy. And so I just love to see a little bit more, I guess, thought on the budget and how that's all going to come together.
Thank you. Any additional or opposing comments? Looks like we don't have any more, so we'll go ahead and finalize our comments in the online system. And the next application will be Jana Art. So you can pull that application up as well. All right, we'll get started on Jana's application. And our first reader is Jaleesa.
Hold on, okay. I thought that Jana's application, the goal section in particular was pretty thoroughly explained and presented. And so I was pleasantly surprised by that. And I felt like she was talking about something that could be extremely convoluted and was able to break it down in a way that I could understand. So I thought that was really good and really interesting. She had some good direction and highlighted how it would help her then achieve her career goals. So I thought that was good. One section, the next section, the feasibility section, I thought was substantial, but there are aspects of her budget, in particular, her costs, that could have been broken down a bit more. Like she has $710 for electronic supplies such as, X, Y, and Z, but what are those actual costs? And then there was a mention as well somewhere in application of providing materials for others. So is that part of providing the materials, or are those costs just for yourself? And if they are, then you also need to add those costs of providing materials for everybody else into your project budget, unless they're in kind. And if they're in kind, then also add those into your in kind section because there's nothing in there. I thought the community engagement was also pretty good, and there was good reasoning behind it, and there was some clear like numerical aspects of that application that she really articulated. So I found this a pretty enjoyable and straightforward application.
Thank you. Our second reader will be Janine Blevins.
Hi, yeah, I agreed with a lot of what Jaleesa just said. It was really a pleasure to read through and well thought through. Kind of building on that feasibility and budget feedback that Jaleesa had offered, I agree. I feel like those electronic expenses were really confusing, and mostly kind of what that led me to question is, how much does it cost for somebody to make one of these at home? Because I think that brings about some feasibility questions for how many people are going to be able to partake in this project and how viral it'll go, and how expensive is it to do it at home. And like clicking on a few of the links she had provided or Googling them, it seemed like it should be maybe under $50 a person. But yeah, would have loved to see more detail on that, because I think that impacts a lot of the other steps. And kind of double clicking into community engagement, I really enjoyed how she was talking about tracking data, and I was curious about her plans on presenting that data. Like, are there ways for people to see it on her website? Like, would they be able to compare themselves to another city or another person? Kind of what's that ongoing engagement, and how does she keep her product kind of sticky so that people are coming back and sharing it with friends, or wanting to make another one, or just continuing to engage. Also, I was curious how long the process took to make one of these patch items, and kind of thinking through that whole, like, if I wanted to do this, would I have to order all those disparate materials from like 8 different websites, or is she going to offer like a package on her website where you can buy it? How long does that take to ship? Like, how do you keep somebody engaged if this is like a month-long process from like finding her tutorial to getting all the materials to actually making it to following up with it? And I mostly say that because I think she's laid out so much already that I think it just piqued my interest to ask a few more questions about what the overall picture of engagement is for her product.
Awesome, thank you, Janine. Are there any new, additional, or opposing comments on Jana's application?
I had one thought, just in terms of like looking at the budget and kind of thinking about the feasibility of it all. If this video is going to serve like as the visual representation for this project, and it's going to like live on a bunch of different websites for like where she's speaking and things like that, it's like you want to make it the absolute best that it can be. And so I noticed that she's planning on, you know, paying for Creative Suite and then paying for an assistant videographer, and was going to do all the editing herself. And there's like the artist fee to compensate for that time. And I was kind of curious about her experience as a videographer, and if it would be worth maybe reallocating some of that money to be able to pay a videographer to help with the editing, or at least be someone she can check in with to make sure that, you know, this DIY video is very clear and straightforward, and just having someone else to kind of help with that process with those funds.
Awesome, thank you. Any more additional comments? All right. Let's finalize your comments in the online system. Give a few seconds for that.
You're actually doing great. Thank you. These are excellent feedback.
Well, our next application will be Joshua Silbert. If you'd like to pull that up as well, I guess it's on the screen there too. All right. Let's get started with Joshua Silbert. Our first reader is supposed to be Jimmy, so we'll move to our second reader, which is Takara.
Awesome, thank you. Again, this was another application that I enjoyed reading, particularly because I know nothing about licensing music or music composition, so I really enjoyed hearing about his goals and what that entailed. Again, I thought it was a strong application. Really enjoyed what he was talking about, but I did have a couple of questions and ideas that might make it a little stronger. I think overall the goal was evident, but it seemed to me, especially in the feasibility part, the most important part of this trip to LA was the one-on-one training with Michael. And I really would have loved for him to just really suss out who this person was, why this one-on-one engagement was important, and how that would have strengthened or aligned with his goals, and what would have happened if he wasn't able to get that one-on-one with Michael, because apparently he is the guy. So what would have happened if that wasn't an option for him? In addition, I really loved how he situated himself within this larger narrative of peak TV and platinum TV and how many opportunities there are, not just for people on the coast, but for people right here in Indiana. And talking about that creative pipeline was really awesome and got me really excited about the community that he was fostering and cultivating. So really just that piece for me was just really figuring out who Michael was, what would have happened if he wasn't able to get that meeting, and what networking opportunities was he really looking for in LA, because it seemed to me he has quite a few connections already. So what does fostering mean, and what does networking mean to him, seeing as he already knows names, knows places, and knows where they work, in a sense?
Wonderful, thank you very much. Since Takara was the second reader on that application, we'll now open it up to any additional or new comments from the entire panel.
Maybe this is going to come in with outlining who this person out in Los Angeles is as well. But there are a lot of new ways that people are licensing music. So as a filmmaker myself, there are lots of online outlets that give musicians opportunities to license their music. I can think of probably 10 or 12 offhand. And so I think maybe investigating that process is something that the applicant should do in addition to going out to LA. But then also with as many opportunities as there are, like he's saying, with peak TV and even online video and the amount of large corporations that exist within Indianapolis, there is a big need for music, not just in TV and not just in film. And so I think approaching local filmmakers and production companies and seeing what their needs are in terms of licensing and maybe being able to license directly would also be a good look. I know on an annual basis, my studio, for example, has a blanket license with 3 different music licensing spots. And if I could use somebody local that was going to give me something that I had exclusive rights to, or that I knew was coming from somebody in my community, I would definitely use that instead of going to these national or international spots where you're fishing through sites of stock music that kind of all sound the same. If you had a connection with somebody locally who I could turn to as an artist, I think that that's another way to investigate being able to license your music that either already exists or you're going to be creating in the future.
Thank you. Any additional comments?
Just thinking about what Maddie said really quickly, I completely agree. And I was nervous about saying that because I was like, oh, would saying that change the nature of his application? Because really my question was, do you really need to go to LA with all of these digital resources and also local needs that people have here? Could you actually get to the goal of creating a passive income, licensing your music while still activating the community here in Indianapolis? What is so necessary about Los Angeles? And I don't know if that I didn't want that to come across as negative, but really that was the question that I had when there's so many opportunities here in central Indiana and so many ways to do that digitally. So thank you for bringing that up, actually.
Yeah, and I think, sorry to jump right back in, but I think doing both is a really good look. I think Los Angeles, yes, it is the epicenter of things. And if you want to get to that international level or that national level, getting in the ear of music supervisors is super important. But it seems like part of what he's trying to do is get away from the hustle of gigging as a musician. And so I think that at the very least, the local could take the place of that So he'd be working towards the same goal in every facet of what he's doing.
Great additional comments. Do we have any more additional comments or opposing comments? All right. If not, we'll have to finalize our comments in the online system. We'll take a few seconds to do that. The next application will be Kate Gregg. If you want to pull that application up. All right. We'll begin on Kate Gregg's application, and our first reader is Anna.
Anna, you're muted. Sorry.
There you go. Sorry. I really loved reading through this application, and it's very clear that Kate's very passionate about this work, and it was just fun to see that shine through. Her goals are very clear as far as like what her ultimate business goals are, and then also for this specific project and how that's going to help her get there. And I thought she really well outlined everything she wanted to do for this specific project, and then like ultimately like entering into contests and winning awards that are international. And so I thought a good just thing to add to some of her goals was also think about that in between. Definitely submitting work to international contests is something she should be doing and working towards, but also there's like tons of regional sports awards and other types of conferences that, or not conferences, competitions that she could be entering her photos into to kind of become more aware of the contest world in that process, and just to get some more direct feedback from judges about like what she could be doing differently as she's taking on this project. And then another just overall thought I had about this was she wants to do this project that is going in and providing this service and highlighting gyms that are providing accessibility to gyms for young people, which is really great. But I was also a little bit wary that combined with her business goals and like making sure she's not presenting herself as a free photographer, since she's also working on establishing herself as a photographer, and these are going to be future clients of hers. I think the language that she uses to present this project to gyms is very important, in that it's a personal project, or that this is like, yeah, I guess maybe a personal project, or that she has funding to like come in and do this work is very important, and not that she's just someone who's working for free and that can't be tapped into later, I think would be something to be very mindful of going into it. But then to get into some of the details and the feasibility of it, she mentions many times selling prints to the athletes that she's going to be photographing and making money off of that. And I was just kind of curious about some of the logistics of that, like if she was planning on doing in-person sales, and if so, that takes up a lot of your time. And can be really expensive. And so maybe if she already has an online gallery set up, since she is a working photographer, where the athletes in the gyms could very easily just go online and order prints and have them delivered, where she wouldn't have to manage the printing process and the framing process. And that's such a small cost to her to have an online gallery like that. So I would have liked to have seen like some of those details of like what the print process looks like, since it is such a big part of her business plan for this project. And then also just something to keep in mind would be model releases. She has big goals for these photos in this project, and she's going to be working with kids as well as established athletes, and just being proactive in making sure that everyone's okay with being photographed and aware of where these photos are going to be used, so that she has this amazing shot, wants to enter it into this contest, and they're not okay with her using it. And that can be a big pain to kind of backtrack and figure out. So just kind of like thinking through some of those details as she approaches this project, I thought would be helpful. And then moving on to community engagement, one of the biggest things that she mentioned needing to work on is getting access to gyms and finding people that are a good fit for her to work with. And I think since she's been doing this for so long already and is so well connected in her community, I think she should definitely just ask people to make personal introductions or email introductions for her, because that personal touch can go a long way when someone directly introduces you. And then also to engage the community after the fact. Once she has an established body of work from this project, it could be very neat to have a show and even like combine that with one of her help portrait sessions that she's donating, or something like that, where everyone can come together, all the different athletes, the different gyms, even other sports photographers that she's interested in working with, and kind of creating a space for all those people to come together and she can meet them and kind of use that as a way to help establish herself in this community that she really wants to be a photographer in and work towards being a full-time photographer. Yeah, I think that's what I have for now.
Thank you very much. Our second reader will be Paulina.
Wow, you like covered it all, didn't you? Those are really great comments. I think just to summarize, I love the project. I love the approach. It's similar to stuff that I have done in the past. I agree. I think my concern is the same. It's like you need to set up a more clear plan for how you're going to monetize this. Like, it's exciting to be able to give back with your talents. And I think that that's what she wants to do. But unless you figure out how that sits in the midst of a bigger marketing strategy for your business, it's going to be really hard to make the leap from doing all this work to actually parlaying it into bigger paid gigs. So I think that there needs to be just more thought put into that. So she'll get the equipment and she'll start reaching out to these gyms, but I think that like it needs to be a bigger project. It needs to engage, I guess, media. It needs to have social media coverage around it. You know, she might want to build out a whole website around this before she jumps in and starts doing this. I'm sure the images are going to be great. Her work is very strong, but it's like you need to build all that stuff out before and not after. Like it needs to be, everything needs to be documented and somehow serve to put her name out there. Because it's hard. I think that maybe her goal is to go from doing this to being able to photograph like big name professional athletes, or maybe work for magazines shooting athletes. I'm not sure, but in and of itself, that project without like a plan will not get her there. I was a little surprised about the prints just because we are living in the digital age. I agree that that is incredibly labor intensive and annoying. I don't do prints myself and try to stay away from them as far as possible. So I wonder if she's thought that through as much as she could. I love the idea of doing a show afterwards. I think that's a great idea. The other thing she could think about is maybe stock photography, although that's a huge other thing that I won't touch with a 10-foot pole. Let's see. She didn't really apply. She didn't mention the cost of applying to competitions. I know there's always submission fees and sometimes they're pretty significant. So that's something that needs to get worked into the budget. And yeah, just a better strategy for how she's going to network with other professionals in the industry. You know, is it like planning a printed piece that she's going to send out to ad agencies and marketing companies? Is it trying to maybe get an agent? There's a lot that can be done there. And getting them like in front of and buying coffee for somebody who's like far, far ahead of you sometimes can be challenging. So I would love to see more ideas of like, you know, are there networking groups that she could go to or any kinds of events, stuff like that. But overall, I'm super excited to see what she does with it. I think that the equipment that she's got listed here is reasonable and good. She's using an equipment company that's very reasonably priced, so she's going to get a lot of bang for her buck. So I just would love to see a better marketing strategy.
Thank you very much. We will open Kate Gregg's application to any new, additional, or opposing comments from the entire panel now.
Especially if you guys have specific ideas on how she can monetize this work or other networking opportunities you've seen that she should tap into.
Yeah, just quickly, one of the things that I saw in this application is that she wants to get these 10 to 20 really high quality images, and that to me was kind of how she was going to shop to gyms as paid work. So using those as a tool to then reach out and say, hey, here's my body of work. So then reaching out to gyms that are not offering what seems like services to an underserved community. So going from a place like the Krista Moore House that has this free boxing after school for kids, and then parlaying that into going to like CrossFit gym that costs $300 a month to showcase their athletes and saying like, hey, I'm a really badass photographer. Here's some stuff that I've done. Here's my rate. Not going in and saying like, hey, I want to photograph some of your athletes. Is that cool? At this point, I'm just going to sell the prints. If that makes sense, that's how I interpreted some of this. So if that's not how it was meant, I would say that would be a good avenue for that. And then also on that note, if that's the case, so like once she's photographing for ESPN, the magazine, and Fight Night and all of like the big publications and stuff, once that's happening for her, I think if this project is something that really spawned that, I think it's important to go back to those institutions and continue to provide services for the people who really helped her get there. At least in my industry, that's something that people have a hard time doing, specifically like if you're thinking about music videos, if you go and you make a music video for somebody because that's going to get you more eyes on your stuff, and then all of a sudden you level up and people are now paying you for the work, I think it's still important to incorporate those people who helped you get there.
Thank you. Any more additional comments? Doesn't sound like any. So please finalize your comments in the online system. As we finish those comments up, Caitlin Calhoun will be our next application if you want to pull that up.
So we've been at this for an hour. Does anybody absolutely need a break, or is everyone okay with powering through the last two applications? Awesome. Okay.
All right. Well, let's go ahead and get started on Caitlin Calhoun's application then. Our first reader will be Maddie.
I'm still pulling it up. Give me just 1 second.
Oh, yeah, you're fine.
Okay, so first thing first, I think as an editor and as a filmmaker, the applicant Caitlin has a really clear direction. She's already, it sounds like, making a living doing more commercial work, but she's looking for something more, and documentary is obviously a really good way to do that. And I think that, again, much like my comment towards the musician who wanted to make a music video for it as a tool, it seems like she's going to use this film as a portfolio piece going forward, which I think is an excellent idea. Anything to kind of kickstart it. I love the subject matter. It's timely. There's a need for it. One thing that I'll say there in terms of goals is that I think partnering with some people would help her get there. She's looking really nicely into the future as far as being a successful documentarian within the next 5 years. And based on the example or the first cut of the film, which already exists, I think it's clear that, you know, the drive is there, but that it can be very difficult to make a living just as a documentary filmmaker, especially within a 5-year timeline. So I think it'll be important to supplement the work that she's already doing with this documentary style stuff. So as the capacity grows and as the experience grows, maybe some of those commercial projects also could fit into her want to tell these more human stories. So I guess my comment there is not specifically towards this project, but more towards the career thing, is that Some of those more human stories can go for bigger commercial brands as well. But getting her style down using this one, I think is a really good idea. As far as feasibility goes, documentary work challenges filmmakers in lots of ways. And I think the biggest one is time investment. She leaves a year for making the documentary, basically from beginning to end. I know a lot of footage already exists, and so she'll be reworking some of that. But the story is going to change in such a way that the scope of the project is changing almost completely. It's going from being focused on the river to being focused on the person's work and helping guide the vision of the river. So I would just warn against thinking, oh, I'm just going to retool some of this, get some additional interviews, because realistically, the B-roll and the footage that's going to match is going to take the project really in a completely different direction. So I think one thing that I would be concerned about the way that it's laid out is the amount of time that she and the co-editor or co-producer spend on it. I just don't know that there's enough outline there. It says the editor is going to donate $2,000 worth of in-kind donations. That's kind of like a week's worth of work for an editor. And I think it's going to take a lot more work than that. So maybe it's just upping that amount of in-kind donation. But I would think seriously about taking that that timeline and either pushing it out or talking about how you're significantly going to donate more time or spend more time on it. In addition to being a commercial filmmaker, jumping in on this full time, I think could be an issue. Towards community engagement, I think the piece itself and going to film festivals and talking about the White River is going to naturally get you involved in the community, and the people that you're talking to are going to do the same thing. One thing that I think is not addressed is the filmmaking community in general. And so I think the way that the filmmaking community is growing and pushing throughout central Indiana, being able to find people who will work on this project with you, either for low or really even no pay, just based on how cool a story has the potential of being and how well you've thought through it. I think that could really take it to the next level to find either a really talented camera operator or a gaffer or a grip, or just somebody who is willing to collaborate with you, potentially for exposure bucks. I know that's not really the model here. We're all trying to monetize what we're doing, but I think with a smaller documentary piece like this, for people who are also trying to get their names out there, especially one that you're already slotting to taking to festivals that has a clear direction, people will jump on board that project and be willing to help. On that note, I actually saw a short film at the Indie Film Fest that also focused on the White River. It's called Onward Ever. And so I don't know if this applicant is actually on the line right now, but I put it in my comments too. I would reach out to that filmmaker. Maybe there's a way to pull some resources and really either condense the timeline or just make one really strong piece with the same message that everybody's going to benefit from. Last note, I know I'm going on a little bit long on this one, but there are also lots of organizations who are trying to clean up the White River. And so this is not only for this project, but also thinking in terms of other documentary films that you might do. I would think about, even before it's done, lining up some showings or some screenings at event spaces with other organizations who are already trying to do this. You're spreading a message that some other people are already carrying. And so I think that using this multimedia tool with them or in conjunction with them could really go a long way, and also tie you back more to the community. And then you're going to get more stories, and you're going to have more people wanting to talk about it. And then realistically, if the goal for this film and for this project is to get your portfolio out there, but also spread the message of saving the White River or rehabbing the White River, then going to the people who are already doing those things, I think makes a lot of sense. Overall, I think really strong though.
Thank you, Maddie. Our second reader is Anna.
Maddie, your comments were so great. We share a lot of the same thoughts. So just a few things to add to that. She mentions wanting to find and establish a mentor as part of like the community engagement and kind of helping build her connections in the film community. And I would say to even just like do that right now before she even starts filming. I think she's in a really solid position with this project where she's already begun. She already has an amazing film to show for, and now she's looking to take that to the next level. So I would advise just like getting all like your resources in your community and people who are going to be a part of this project established to make sure she's thought through all the different angles this film could go and has someone who can be there kind of providing an objective view along the way as she's doing these additional interviews and kind of restructuring this film. Because especially once you get into a project this deep, it's so easy to just get tunnel vision and forget to consider other things that are obvious to someone else that you just maybe didn't see. So that would be one recommendation, is to go ahead and establish that relationship. And then as far as the community engagement part, there's, in addition to people who are tapped into film festivals, there's an automatic community built in to this project just in Indianapolis and the White River. Like everyone in Indianapolis who's grown up here has a connection there. So considering how to reach those people who might not be as easily or as immediately tapped into what you'd see on social media or at the Heartland Film Festival, find a way to engage all those other people who this project would mean a lot to. And part of that could be that leading into making sure she's documenting this process along the way to help promote this film and make sure she has solid visuals for when it is festival time and she's going to need print materials and things like that.
All right, thank you, Anna. We'll now open up to the full panel for any new, additional, or opposing comments on Caitlin Calhoun's application. All right, sounds like everybody has said their piece, so please finalize your comments in the online system. We will give you a few seconds to do that before we move to our final application for this morning, Zenobia Garrett. All righty. Does anybody need more time? If not, we will start on our final application. Zenobia Garrett, our first reader will be Takara.
Thank you. Again, Zenobia Garrett's application was one that I really enjoyed looking at. So we'll just get right into it. I'm going to go ahead and start with her areas of growth. I'm actually a little nervous about her proposed 6 tour dates, only because at the time of the application was published, she didn't give any examples of any spots that she wanted to hit. And so I was just wondering if this was just a long shot or something that was really feasible for her. So I would really be intrigued to see if she could at least give me some ideas of connections or locations that she could potentially be performing at. So that's something that I would really love to see. In addition, under community, I will stop and just say I love the way she uses language. I found that really exciting, the way she talked or the way she wrote things down in her application. But she mentioned community, and it really wasn't Indiana specific. I think she used two phrases. She used women, and then she used arts consumers in her application. And I would have really loved to see that be made specific. I don't have a problem with her audience being women, but I would have loved for her to tell me why, as a singer-songwriter, a spoken word artist, why her music is connecting with women the most, and why she chose to use the phrase arts consumer. So I think I just love a little bit more clarification on that. In addition, in terms of her long-term goal, she said she wanted to be a full-time performer, which is really exciting, but then she also used the phrase joy coach, which I thought was really fun, really dynamic. But again, that really wasn't defined. I didn't know what it meant to be a successful joy coach and what that entailed or what the goals were, any measurable goals, other than having a good time, which she mentioned a couple of times during her application. So really more defining, more clarification in the work. One thing I really loved in this project was not only did she mention the on-ramp grant as helping her move this project forward, but she also put her money where her mouth was and mentioned her own personal investment in the project, which I thought was really great to make this happen. I would have loved to see maybe some collaboration. I think sometimes it's really hard to tour when you don't have a road dog, so to speak. So I'm wondering if there's anyone that she could link up with, another artist, a band, another poet, someone who's moving and shaking in central Indiana. I didn't have that recommendation, but that was something that I was curious about, if she could really make this a movement and journey with someone during this tour to make that happen a little bit more. She also mentioned a social media strategy as part of her goals. She wanted a videographer at 2 of these tour stops, and then she also wanted to release a YouTube series showing her progress. And I was a little nervous about the feasibility of that, only because, you know, she said she was going to give herself 9 months to birth this project. She thought that'd be really poetic. But in addition, in that 9 months, she has to do tour dates and practice the guitar lessons, and then also at the same time film all this happening, edit it, put it on YouTube on a weekly basis. I really love to see her maybe scale that down a bit, and maybe she could record and maybe release something after or as a teaser leading up to the start of the tour. But doing something weekly, I think, might take away from the real meat of it, which is making sure that the tour happens, that she gets those tour dates. So I'd love to see her maybe scale that down a little bit. In addition, she mentioned really quickly that this was all going to set up a new album release. She said the songs are already written and it's all ready to go, but one thing I'd love to her to clarify and maybe make the application a little bit more dynamic is what lends this album to being really ready to be performed live. What sets this album or music apart from anything that she's done before, and why is she so proud and wanting to take the show on the road? So I think that would have made me a little bit more excited about the work if she would just have told me a little bit more about this new album, what she was hoping to share with the world because of it, or even just the title of the album. So all I know is it's a new album. She's going to be taking it on tour. So I'd really love to see a little bit more of that. Again, during the community engagement piece, really thought she was missing some language about her local community or the community that she's already developed. I wanted to know the artists that she's working with, other peers that she's inspired by, and who might help her move this project along the way. Other than that, just very, very excited that she already has the music done. She knows exactly what she wants to do in terms of her goals. Just a little nervous about the feasibility because there seemed to be a lot of moving parts in here and she wasn't able to give a lot of specifics. So I think if the specifics were in here, I'd be really jazzed about what's going to happen in the next 9 months.
Sorry, I'm on mute. All right, so our second reader should have been Jimmy, but we'll open up to any new and additional or opposing comments from the entire panel at this point.
I agree. I think that she's very excited about what she wants to do in her vision. It is exciting, but it's a little rah-rah. It's a little bit more hype than the details, which is really what makes it happen. So I agree on that end. One thing that I noted in my comments was that she mentions that she wants to kind of track and document the people who attend her shows as a way to grow her career. And I just, again, wanted to see more detail. You can't be the performer and the person that's minding the table and collecting email addresses and interacting with people. So who's coming on the road with her? What is the strategy for collecting data, if you will? Probably the least exciting part of putting on an event is tracking attendance and who's there and why they're there and getting their contact information. But I've done enough events where the day off, it's been like, wait, who's doing this? It's like, oh, we forgot about this. Like, that's terrible. So I just wanted to make sure that she thought of that as well. More stuff to do.
Awesome. What more comments are there?
Yeah, I think one thing for me throughout this application was, and she acknowledges this, wanting to do lots of different things. It seems like there's kind of a general lack of focus towards the overall goal of where she's going. And so she mentions having a mentor, and so I think that that's something that's really going to go a long way. Somebody who's already doing this successfully, who she can bounce ideas off of. I think part of this process is that's kind of what we're doing for her right here. But I think having somebody on a day-to-day basis who can say like, yeah, you need that person on the road with you, or you need to partner with somebody who's already successful so you can get these dates. And one other thing I'll say, I know she said she's gonna pay for event spaces. If she has a built-in audience and there are going to people who are going to be there, hopefully those venues would actually be paying her to perform. Maybe not for these first 6 dates, but I think going forward as a performer, not necessarily looking to rent out a space every time you're looking for a space who's going to agree to pay you for the services. So just something to think about going forward.
Any more additional comments?
Yeah, I have one to add to that, because she kind of, this application kind of reminded me of what a lot of my students do when they're really community focused and I want to serve and give back and do all that stuff, which a lot of applications in this were. But it just reminded me that at the point in the juncture that she's in right now might be a point for her to think about the value that she's providing and to really articulate what that value is. Because she has all these different network groups to play with. What kind of value is her performing work going to provide to those groups? And what I saw through a lot of this was that she was talking about how it was valuable for her mostly. So kind of shifting that lens and shifting that perspective in the direction of her audience and her customers might be something to think about. And value in a lot of ways doesn't have to be just about money, it can be about all kinds of things. So trying to figure out what that is and leveraging those value points at the points in time whenever, either during her tour or beyond, might be something for her to start thinking about now.
Any more additional comments out there?
I just want to say one really positive thing about this application is that, you know, she's trying to inspire this joy. She's trying to inspire people to learn something about themselves and identify with her through the art. And the first thing that she's going to do is invest in herself as well to be able to spread that joy. And I love the sentiment behind that in terms of the guitar lessons and being really honest with where she's at in her journey. And so that's just one thing that got me really excited when I read it.
Great, thank you. Last call for any more additional comments. All right, then we have concluded the panelist process today. Anna, do you have anything else to say before we close out here?